first take roll call, and then Peggy is going to a little welcome. Panama Bartholomew. Are you here? Thank you. Stephanie Blake? Not yet. Delia Diaz?
I'm here.
Great. Mary Dooley?
Saw her.
I see her too. Jesse Feller?
Here.
Thank you. Dave Alden?
Here.
Thank you. Allie Gaylord?
Yes.
Janice Thompson? Not yet. Erin, can you please tell me how to properly pronounce your last name?
Hi, Erin Schmaleski, and present.
Thank you. Roberto Mares?
Here.
Thank you. Yancey Huckleball?
Here.
Roger Leventhal?
I'm here.
Thank you. Ileana Madrigal?
Here.
Thank you. Matt Brown?
Here.
Thank you. Josh Simmons? And Bill Wolpert?
Here.
And John Schribs?
Here.
Chris Rebelo?
Here.
Thank you. Phil Boyle?
Here.
And Sierra Downey?
Present.
And Bill Reinhardt.
Here.
Great. Okay, so we're missing a couple of folks, Stephanie and Janice Thompson, but hopefully they will filter in. Peggy, you want to give our welcome?
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, GPAC members, and welcome to our Petaluma community members that are tuning in, and hopefully will tune in for all of our GPAC meetings. I just want to let our GPAC committee know how honored and humbled we are by the willingness of this diverse representation of leadership to serve our community over the next couple of years to help create a lasting vision for for Petaluma's future. We know that our needs have changed greatly, since our last general plan, and we are quickly running out of time, not to adopt a plan, but to address the challenges that we're dealing with climate. This is our opportunity to rebuild and recover and prioritize equity in all of our sectors: housing, our unsheltered, racial and social equity, active transportation and mobility, climate action and adaptation, and environmental justice. General plan is key in making Petaluma more sustainable and resilient, and we're able to do that because of your dedication and expertise, and of the talents that we've secured in Rainey and Associates, and the amazing talent that they've assembled. Just cannot tell you how excited we are. It's going to be hard work, and I think we have all the right people around the table, and I'm hoping that every member of our community will see themselves in this general plan. So with that said, let's have a great first meeting and subsequent meetings. And again, thank you so much for stepping up and volunteering for this big effort. And take it away, Christina.
Thanks, Peggy. All right, I'm actually going to hand it over to Matt Ramey and Dave Javid of Ramey and Associates and Plan to Place.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm Dave Javid of Plan to Place. Great to see some of you who I've already met and other new faces. Great to be here. Matt, did you want to bring up the PowerPoint to get started here? We just wanted to quickly run you through the objectives for tonight's meeting. Obviously, we're here to initiate the GPAC process and to get to meet each other. learn a little bit more about your roles and responsibilities, about kind of how we're going to navigate this process together and collaborate through this great process together. Give you a quick overview about the general plan process, the timeline, the different elements and different phases of the project, so you really get a sense of again, how this is going to work, and a general sense of the meeting types and the topics that we might discuss, which will continue to evolve over time. And then the all-important topic of the Brown Act will also be a key part of this, and we have the city attorney here today to give you an overview of that. So we're really excited to be here to walk through this process with you. Next slide, please, Matt.
Dave, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see Janice Thompson in the audience. So
thank you.
Might need to have the link resent to her.
Yeah, thank you. We can bring her over. We were busy in the background trying to get it over. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Panama, and great use of the raised hand. Cool, we've already got that figured out. Excellent. So we wanted to roll right into introductions here. So if we can get to the next slide, this is really an introduction first of city staff, and then we'll do a quick introduction of the consultant team, and then most importantly, we'd also like you to introduce yourself. So you've already had a chance to hear from Peggy. Heather, if you want to introduce yourself, we'll just kind of go around the horn here.
Hi there, everybody. I know many of you or our paths have crossed over the last decade here in Petaluma. I'm so happy to be kicking this effort off and look forward to working with all of you.
Christina.
And I'm Christina Paul, the project manager for the city for the general plan. And it's been really a joy to get to know the folks on the GPAC just as we've been chatting to get ready for this meeting. Thank you all very much for participating.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Eric Danley, the city attorney. I'm delighted to be here to later in the program provide a brief overview about the Brown Act and answer any questions. Hopefully that'll be helpful orientation to help you do the very important work you're going to be doing to make recommendations regarding our updated general plan, which is going to be so crucial and instrumental in so many of the city's efforts and programs going forward. So thanks very much for your participation.
Eric Roberts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Roberts. I'll be moderating tonight's meeting. In particular, I'll be assisting with the public comment portion of tonight. I look forward to hearing your comments and look forward to a wonderful presentation tonight.
Thanks all. Let's start with Matt.
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm Matt Ramey with Ramey Associates. We're the lead consultant on the general plan update. Pleasure to be here. We are a little bit intimidated by the intelligence and quality and knowledge of these folks. So we're really looking forward to learning from all of you in this process. And we have a team of folks here tonight who will be helping out with the meeting. Ron?
Good evening, everybody. Ron Whitmore. I'm a principal with Ramey Associates and project manager for the Petaluma General Plan Update. Grew up in the Bay Area and a long-time community development and community planning junkie. And I look forward to working with all of you, and thank you very much for your service to the city.
Hi, everybody. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kelsey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelsey Hubbard. I'm also with Ramey and Associates. I'm an intermediate planner and designer, and I will be helping Ron and Matt as the deputy project manager on the general plan. Very much excited for this process and happy to meet you all tonight.
Thank you, Kelsey. You all have already met me. I'm, again, Dave, job with Plan to Place. We're helping with all things community engagement and the public facing side of this project, and really look forward to collaborating with you all to make sure that all voices are heard and community members have a chance to participate in this process throughout. So great to be here. And Paul.
Good evening, Paul Kronzer with Plan to Place, assisting Dave on all the engagement with this exciting project, and really looking forward to meeting all of you and working through this process together.
Great. And then we wanted to just give a quick snapshot. As Peggy mentioned, we are very fortunate to have a fantastic team of experts in many different facets that are going to be assisting us through this process. I don't know if I want to read through all the names here of the firms that are working with us, but we have folks that are covering everything from the environmental analysis, the transportation, to economics, to the housing element, which you know is key and important part of this process, as well as historic and cultural resources, and everything in between. And it really is going to take a village and a host of experts working with all of you collaboratively to make sure this is a successful project. So we just want to note those folks here, and you'll get to meet members of these different teams as we move through the process and as those topics come up. So we just want to make a quick reference to that. So this is now the opportunity to meet you all as the members of the GPAC. And to get to know each other a little bit here. So our hope was to keep this short and sweet and just ask you each to say your name, maybe how long you've lived in Petaluma, your favorite place in Petaluma, and why you applied to the GPAC. And there are 21 of you, so we're hoping if you can keep this to about 2 minutes, and this will be a great exercise right off the bat, working together to share space and kind of efficiently provide your input. So I'm going to go down the list, alphabetical order by last name. I think we even had a timer. I'm not sure if we're using the timer, but we'll kind of go through this efficiently as possible. And if you can keep it generally to 2 minutes, we'll kind of keep track of that as well. And we'll all get to meet each other here. So let's get started with that. We're going to start with Dave Alden. You should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Of course, after a year, I should have learned that. There were 4 things you wanted me to talk to, and I see the list has gone away. Could you put that maybe back up?
Sure. I could run through it with you real quick. So it's just your name, how long you've lived in Petaluma, your favorite place in Petaluma, and why you applied to the GPAC. And we actually might just keep the slide off just so we could all see each other clearly as we speak.
That's fine too.
Great.
Dave Alden, semi-retired civil engineer. Moved to Petaluma in 2002, so coming up on 20 years next year. Favorite place in Petaluma, probably got to go with Kentucky Street between Western and Washington. And if I want to narrow it down further, probably Copperfield's Books. Why I applied, I head up a couple of different volunteer civic engagement organizations here in Petaluma, and we're all about exactly what this group is about, so it would have been odd for me not to apply. Thank you.
A+, Dave, for staying efficient. Thank you so much for that. Next, we're going to move to Panama.
Hey everybody, Panama Bartholomew. I run a nonprofit organization focused on getting natural gas out of buildings across the country. I've lived in Petaluma for 3 years, but my children are 6th generation Petalumans. So I'm the carpetbagger in the family. I like me some Water Street Bistro, and I applied to GPAC. I love planning, and I want to contribute to a really high quality of life for the future of Petaluma.
Fantastic. Thank you, Panama. Next, we'll move to Stephanie Blake. I believe we said Stephanie wasn't with us yet. Is she here with us now?
That's correct. I'll send her an email.
Okay, sounds good. Next, we'll go to Phil Boyle.
Good evening. Lived in Petaluma for 30 years, almost 30 years. Raised our 2 kids here. Love Petaluma. I'm currently a planner for the town of Puerto Madera. Prior to that, I was in San Anselmo, and prior to that, I was a planner for the city of Petaluma. Definitely my favorite job so far. Favorite spot of Petaluma is kayaking the Petaluma Slough. I know they call it a river, but you know, it's fine.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. I think you might have covered it, but why you joined the GPAC. Oh, yeah, sorry, Matt. Do you have a question?
I joined the GPAC to give back to Petaluma.
Excellent.
Eric Roberts. Oh, good. You just let her in. You let Stephanie in. Just wanted to say I saw her there raising her hand, flagging us that she wanted to join.
Excellent. Hi, Stephanie. Great timing. We actually just were about to pass your name. We're all introducing ourselves, our name.
Yeah, no, sorry. I've been listening. I just wasn't able to participate, so I appreciate that.
Thank you for your patience. All right, you're up.
So my name's Steph. I joined. I think I moved to Petaluma about 2.5 years ago. I decided to join because I have 3 young kids. I moved here because I want to raise the family and love love the neighborhood and just the environment here. And I think some of my creative skills that I've sort of built outside of Petaluma, I would love to apply to this city. And my favorite place, I love Wickersham Park, and I also love the whole sort of industrial area down by the river. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Next, we're going to go to Matt Brown.
Hey everybody, Matt Brown. I've lived in Petaluma for 10 years. My favorite place would be Helen Putnam Park, right there. And I applied, I was the former editor of the Petaluma Argus-Courier, so I learned a lot about all of the issues that the general plan covers, and I'm really interested in that. And I also, like many people here, have 3 kids as well, and so I really would like a hand in the future of the city and for my kids. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Matt. Next, we're going to go to Erin Schmaleski.
Ooh, that was awesome.
Sweet, did I get it right? All
Yeah.
right. Awesome.
Hi, Erin Schmaleski. She, her. I moved to Petaluma when I was 8 years old. It was probably one of the best moves given I lived in Santa Maria. No offense to Santa Maria, but it was not for me. Growing up here, I have to say one of my favorite places, it's kind of odd, but driving Old Adobe Road. That's close to the airport, and I grew up there because of our previous family business. So just being out in that kind of quadrant is my thing. And I'm here largely to bring equity to the project, voices that are normally not heard, based on my work with North Bay Organizing Project and community organizing in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was great. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Delia Diaz.
Hi, I've lived in Petaluma for 2.5 years. I'm originally from Chicago. I lived in a few different places. Actually came here for work. And my interest in joining was without knowing the area. I mean, I feel like I've chosen well and like to keep Petaluma strong going forward. But I've been involved on the economic part as far as negotiating sites, whether it's building a new plant or picking an office site, and I dealt with leaders in that regards. And I just was wondering, curious about how to put that together and kind of lend my knowledge, but a lot of it was curiosity. And my favorite place is that Riverwalk area downtown. I never thought of it as a slough walk, so I'll stick with Riverwalk, but I may think of it differently next time I walk by there. So looking forward to participating.
Great, thank you, Delia. Next, we'll go to Mary Dooley.
Hi, I'm Mary Dooley. I have a business in town called Mad Architecture. I've lived here for 31 years and raised 3 sons here, and I'm really honored to serve on this committee and meet new people and work with new people to build a vision together. I'm also really happy to see familiar faces that I've served on committees with in the past, and also even some young folks I've seen grown up here. So this is really a great group, I think. My favorite places are the watersheds and the open spaces and the riverfronts. So if it has to do with what flows into the slough and what meets the edges, those are my favorite places. And I feel like my role, part of my drive is the importance of preserving the natural resources and trees and giving back and participating in this vision, this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we're going to go to Sierra Downey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sierra Downey. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I'm a climate justice community organizer with the Sunrise Movement, the local hub, the Sonoma County hub here. I've lived in Petaluma for 27 years. Oh my gosh. I'm first generation Petaluman, so my family's from far afield, but I feel very incredibly privileged to have grown up here and want to be a part of building a future for it. And the reason I joined this particular body was because through my work with Sunrise, we operate out of hope. we as young people know that there's practically no future for us, and that's a scary thing, but we have hope that together we can change that. And so part of why I'm here is that I believe in this work. I believe in a future for Petaluma, a climate resilient future rooted in equity. And so that's why I applied, and I'm really, really honored to be here with all of you. And just do this process together. I'd say it was really hard to choose a favorite spot, but I'm gonna have to go with Schollenberger Park, Schollenberger Wetlands. I just remember my first field trips as a school child here were out to Schollenberger. And it's walking distance from my house. So I remember going there and seeing all the birds and the pickleweed and yeah, just doing a lot of good nature time out there. So was that all we had to say? Was there anything else?
Yep, I think that covers it. Yeah, thank
Excellent.
you, Sierra.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Jesse Feller.
Hi, everyone. Jessie here. Great to be here. I have lived in Petaluma for about 4.5 years. Grew up just south in San Rafael and also west in Bolinas in San Francisco. So Bay Area native and really excited to live in Petaluma. I also have two tiny kids. Live across the street from Stephanie. So our kids will grow up together. And I, like her, I'm really interested in, I joined GPAC because I'm really focused on making sure Petaluma has a sustainable, resilient, equitable future. So my kids can live here and we're not all driven out by fires, unaffordable housing, and all the rest that we're all overlapping crises that we're facing. So favorite spot, actually I've recently discovered Ellis Creek. My son, who's 5, is a budding herpetologist, so he's extremely interested in discovering lizards, and Ellis Creek is a great spot for that. So beautiful spot, and impressed by the wastewater creativity facility, and yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and great to meet everybody.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Next is Allie Gaylord.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allie Gaylord. I work for a nonprofit affordable housing provider, and I've lived in Petaluma for almost 1 year. It'll be 1 year next month. My favorite place in Petaluma, other than my house, which I've seen a lot of over the last year, is Chileno Valley Road is what I'm going to say. I like to bike down there. I like the dairy, or the cows that are grazing. It's always so beautiful. And then coming back to Ray's Deli to get a sandwich and a beverage afterwards. I joined the GPAC because housing is a passion of mine. And I think, housing justice, climate justice, equity, it's all linked together. And having the opportunity to influence that in Petaluma for the future is really powerful. So I'm really excited to see everybody and to work with you on this process.
Thanks so much, Allie. Next, we'll go to Yancey Huckleball.
Hey everyone, my name is Yancey Huckleball. I've been in Petaluma for about 1.5 years now. My favorite place here, I'm gonna have to second Sierra, is Schollenberger, and I also really like April Pantry. They have these giant chocolate chip cookies. And I applied to GPAC because through my role as a director of youth programs with PPSC, I saw the community really come together to support our young people, who are just struggling through distance learning and all that's happening. And I wanted to be a more active member of this community as well. And so how do we kind of replicate that care is, for me, I'm able to give my time and kind of be part of this process and planning for the future. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yancey. Next, we'll go to Roger Leventhal.
Hi, I'm Roger Leventhal. I've been in town about 9 years. I've been volunteering on various committees since I got here. So I was on transit, then parks, and then bike ped. So I'm professionally, I'm an engineer and hydrologist, and so all things water and water on the landscape. And the rivers, I'm very interested in that and integrating that in sea level rise. I taught a hydrology at Sonoma State last year, and just very interested and excited about how to integrate that into the urban environment. I have a 14-year-old, so he's just as happy not to talk to me. So, but I do sense the worry that we've expressed tonight, kind of about the future. Part of it's at age, but I think kids really internalize it these days. So, hoping we can make some small difference.
Thanks, Rod. Do you want to name your favorite spot? Did I miss that?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Putnam. Because I go there pretty much every day to kind of exercise.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Next is Ileana.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ileana Madrigal. I have lived in here for the past 5 years and a half. My favorite place, I think, is also Helen Putman Park. And why I apply, I work for Via Esperanza Family Resource Center that focuses on low-income Spanish-speaking families. And I want to make sure the Spanish-speaking community are involved here. And I'm also a graduate student studying public and urban affairs, so it's a combo while advocacy, equity, and urban affairs. And I'm really happy to be here and to help shape our community's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Roberto. Was Roberto with us?
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Hello, everybody. I'm Roberto Rosila. I was born and raised here in Petaluma and actually attended community college here. I studied aerospace engineering at San Jose State. And my favorite place in Petaluma, I would say downtown in general. It's a nice place to grab a dinner or a drink. But if I'm going to walk the dog, I got to say Helen Putnam and Schellenberger are two very nice places to go. Why I applied, I was actually told about this committee and that my skill set would, help in organizing and planning, the next couple of years for Petaluma. And so I would like to provide my systems thinking expertise to this committee. But most importantly, I want to get back to the community that I grew up in that gave me a lot of opportunity to be in the career that I am today. So.
Thanks so much, Roberto. Thanks for that. Next, we're going to go to Chris.
Hi, everybody. Chris Rebelo. I've lived in Petaluma for 20 years. I am the chair of the Senior Advisory Committee here in town, and we are all about age-friendly. That's one of the impetuses for applying for the GPAC. So age-friendly communities are great places to both grow old and grow up in. So it includes all ages, and a lot of the focus of age-friendly just so tracks everything that's going to be discussed during this GPAC, so it just made sense. My day job is at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, so I hope to bring a public health focus to the work of the GPAC. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Chris. Next, we're going to go to Bill Reinhardt.
Hi, everybody. Bill Reinhardt. I moved here at the end of beginning of 94, about 27 years ago. After living someplace that was not as desirable, I picked out Petaluma on a map, thinking it might be great. Turns out I was right. Love Petaluma. And I still feel like I'm a new guy here, though. I find new places all the time that I love. My favorite places are, I love downtown, really like the waterfront, but also the open spaces around the fringes and our parks. I think I got involved. I've been in land planning and design for about over 30 years, but very little local work. So this was a good opportunity to get involved and keep it local. And I'm glad to be a part. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we'll go to John Schribs.
Okay, John Schribs, and I am currently president of Petaluma Wetlands Alliance, and I'm also chair of the tree committee for the city, and I do a couple other things around town. Help co-manage the St. James Gardens, community gardens right nearby us. And I came here 30 years ago. I researched the entire Bay Area and picked Petaluma because I found it to be probably the best place to raise children and grow old, and it still is. I still believe that. I've had my kids raised here. Brought my mom here with senior services, was tremendous here. So I've seen lots of things happen. I coach soccer and been to a lot of the recreational fields. And I was a retired science teacher at Casa Grande for 17 years. So I actually know Erin from prior students of mine. So nice to see you here. And the reason I just got on the GPAC is, my favorite place in Petaluma is actually the entire watershed. I come from an environmental and science background. I taught science at Casa Grande. So I love everything biological as well as environmental and the entire watershed. And my approach here is holistic, looking at systems and the holistic approach to the entire town. It's a beautiful place that has everything in it, and has its own identity. I'd love us to keep us in this valley with our own identity, and I look forward to this vision that we're creating here. And I think we're going to be leaders in this country, and I'm glad to be part of this group to make that happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Next on the list is Joshua Simons.
Hello, my name is Josh Simmons. Pronouns are he, him, L. I've lived in Petaluma for 4 years. I grew up a bit in Marin and Mendocino counties, but primarily here in Sonoma County. I moved to Petaluma because I needed to start commuting to San Francisco, and Petaluma is about as far south as I was willing to relocate. My favorite places, the airport area. I'm a student pilot, the open spaces. I really love the area around the Mystic and Petaluma Pie, because most years when there's not a pandemic, my husband and I run a nonprofit tech conference there called North Bay Python. I applied to GPAC because I'm a volunteer and professional community organizer. And I spent 4.5 years organizing local independent professionals in tech design and marketing back in the early 2010s. I found I was still struggling to get by, so I spent about 7 years really focused on myself. A couple of years ago, I decided I had invested enough in myself, and it was time to give back to the communities that made me who I am. Recently, I've spun up a side project called Petaluma Civics, helping to bring more people into the process, helping people engage with their government, because I like living out loud and bringing people with me, ideally people who don't look like me, as I learn and grow. Accessibility in the broadest sense of the word is the reason that I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Josh. Next, we'll go to Janice Thompson. Janice, are you with us?
I'm here. I'm Janice Cater Thompson. My family, I'm part of the Fishman family and the Cater family. In 1913, the Caters moved to Petaluma. They left Europe, and the Fishmans came in 1918. So we have a lot of history in this community. My favorite places to go, I like Schollenberger Park, and Ellis Creek is near and dear to my heart. I was a founding member of the Petaluma Wetlands Alliance back in like 1999. The watershed is very important. I liked the connection from north to south. I was a dental hygienist, was my career. I'm retired from that. I like to give back to a community, so that's why I wanted to be on the GPAC, and I want to look into the future and not into the past and move forward. And I really am happy with all the new people that are part of this community, but people that are moving into this community, really high quality, and it's really exciting to be part of this. And thank you very much. And one other thing is Schollenberger Park was where my grandfather's tallow plant was. And so when I was young, we would go to the tallow plant, which was at Cater Lane, and Schollenberger Park wasn't there. It was just part of the slough at that time. So I have a lot of history. I also live on the east side, which is a good thing, I think, for understanding the difference between the east and the west side. And I'm looking forward to participating. And it was interesting, Phil Boyle, I couldn't figure out who you were. Now I know who you are, Phil. Past worked for the city in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And last but not least, we have Bill Wolpert. Bill.
Yes, hello. I'm a local architect. My firm is Green Building Architects, and former planning commissioner. This is my 20th year in Petaluma. And when I first moved here, I was involved in the last general plan update. And I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. A lot of them are still friends today. And one thing led to another, and I've kind of been involved in my community ever since. My favorite places, boy, like Panama, Water Street Bistro came to mind. Well, no, the whole Water Street. No, it's all of the historic downtown. Well, it's all of the historic districts. I really like those. Of course, I like, biking, so I love Chileno Valley. I lived out there for a few years. I looked around for a while before I moved to Petaluma, physically driving around the Northwest. I had friends that lived in Tamales Bay, and I stayed with them before I left, and again 6 weeks later when I came back. And I determined there was no place I liked better than this spot in Sonoma County. I think it's a real gem. So I know about half the people on this committee, and I'm honored to work with them, and I look forward to working with those I haven't met yet.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. And a quick round of applause for you all. First task complete. You all did fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm truly inspired by all the great background and expertise and passion for this community. I'll hang out with you all at Schollenberger Park here soon. It sounds like everyone has that high on their list, which is fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to now actually hand it over to Matt Ramey that will go over the GPAC roles and responsibilities, and we'll go on from there. So thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Hello again, everybody. As you will notice, Dave and I are going to be co-facilitating these meetings. So we are going to be somewhat interchangeable with this. He'll run some meetings, I'll run some meetings, but overall it is going to be the two of us along with city staff, plus lots of experts on our consultant team. Tonight's meeting is going to be more about presenting than about discussing. Apologies. This is the meeting where we try and get all of the bureaucratic nuts and bolts stuff out of the way so we don't have to deal with it the rest of the time. And we can spend the rest of our meetings talking about really cool things. At this meeting, we talk about things that are not quite as interesting. So I'm going to go to roles and responsibilities. They're all important, but just not as interesting. So roles and responsibilities, we've spoken with many of you about what the roles are, but I just want to go over this. So we have a 21-member ad hoc committee. It's a committee that will dissolve at the end of this process, which is expected to be about 2 years. What we want you to do on this committee is to help us with the general plan, to provide feedback and guidance. We're going to be doing a huge amount of community engagement, so we're going to need some help thinking about what we heard and what that means for the work in the general plan. We want you to be a sounding board for new ideas and approaches that each of you are going to bring to the table, but that we are going to bring to the table as well. And so we want you to help us see what sticks when we throw things up on the wall. We need help in some key topics on the general plan about helping to develop the vision, guiding principles, goals, policies, implementation actions. There's going to be materials for you to review at key milestones. We need your help with connecting with the diverse community members. Community engagement is going to be so critical with this, and we really need your help in making sure that we are reaching as many folks as possible during the process. Your level of commitment, there's sort of a minimum level, and there's probably not a maximum level of commitment. So the minimum level is that it's kind of like a code in a building code. That's the minimum of what you have to do in order to get by, but really we hope that people will do more than this. So we would obviously like you to attend the GPAC meetings. Your participation is really critical. We know it's a large group, and we're going to talk about how we can share space together on the call. We want you to share your ideas. We want you to be honest about your opinions. And if you, if something's not sounding right to you, we want you to tell us, either during the meetings or between meetings. We'd like you to review materials prior to meetings. We are going to do our best to send materials out a week in advance of meetings. This didn't have as much to review, but we are going to be sending materials out in advance. We are going to have topic-specific working group meetings. We are not going to have subcommittees, but what we're going to do is to have smaller groups which are going to be a combination of GPAC members and city staff and members of the consultant team and other members of the community, work together on some specific topics. So I think the first one, we'll talk about this a little bit later, we think the first one is going to be about community engagement. It was amazing hearing all of the ties that many of you have to the community and that you actually do engagement as part of your jobs. And we would love to tap into that expertise. So I'm just going to use this as an example. We're probably going to tap a few of you to help us think through what engagement should look like for the process and how we do outreach for the community. We'll probably, maybe meet once or twice, and then, that'll probably be it at that point, and maybe we'll come back together during the process. But that's the idea of the working group, for a few folks to come together on specific topics, and then that will feed back to the group. We would like you to attend community workshops and other meetings. And then if you are interested, we'd like you to host general plan sponsored events with groups that you're connected with. Many of you are connected with groups that will help us reach out to different members of the community, and you can serve as a host for those meetings with our participation, of course. The meeting format, you will get a sense of that this evening. The GPAC is not a decision-making body, but we do want you to provide recommendations that will really help guide the process. The meetings are going to be run by the general plan team, which is going to be Dave and myself and Christina and Heather and others from our teams. There's not a chair or a vice chair. If you have ideas about what some topics you think we should talk about, bring those to us. We're happy. We have a lot that we're going to have to work on, but we can certainly modify if there are topics or ways of discussing things that you all have in mind. However, it is going to be a general plan team, a city and consultant run meeting. We really want these meetings to be dynamic, interactive, and informal. And this is really, I think, really important. I think I can just get the sense that this group is going to be that way anyway, just from the our first few minutes before the meeting and our interactions that Dave and I had with all of you prior to this meeting. But we have found that when working on general plan advisory committees like this, that we get a lot more done if it's relaxed and we're not kind of standing on formalities. So we do want the meetings to have an interactive component to that. The GPAC is going to operate in the spirit of consensus. It doesn't mean we will necessarily get to 100% agreement on every topic. We are not going to do roll call votes on anything. We will, however, do straw polls to get an overall sense of the direction. There are going to be topics, there's 21 of you and there may be 42 opinions on any given topic. So we realize that we're going to try and move to getting to consensus, but if there are topics where we can't and where there's real diverse opinions, we will bring that to the ultimate decision maker, which is the city council. So we're not going to leave the minority decision behind, but especially with things where it seems pretty split, we will bring those forward and let the council make that decision. Each of you is responsible for communicating your position, your intentions, concerns, ideas. We really need each of you to step up and say what you're thinking. We need you to do that while also sharing space. And that is going to be, as you might imagine, a challenge with 21 folks. Several of you who I met with brought that up as, we essentially, can't remember who it was who said, essentially there's pretty much 21 executive directors who are trying to be part of, who are part of this group. So, we want your expertise, and we're going to use different techniques like small group discussions during the meetings and breakout groups, as well as these working groups, in order to make sure that people get to share their ideas when they, throughout all of this. And then we will provide summaries of the meetings. They're not going to be meeting minutes. It's not going to be he said, she said, they said. It's going to be overall, what did we cover, and what were the comments, and what's the direction? We'll give you a chance to look at those, and if there's anything that we missed, we're happy to add those back in. The ground rules for the meeting, you all have been part of these meetings before. We want you to participate in good faith. and respect your fellow members. You will likely have differences of opinion at times on things. That's okay. We want that. We want those differences. We want those ideas brought up, but we need to allow space for those differences. If you don't understand what someone has said, if you, if it doesn't resonate with you, ask a question for clarification so you can try and get to mutual understanding. We'd like everyone to be a good listener, to share the floor, not to interrupt. We look forward to having meetings in person, but for now it is going to be on Zoom, and we're going to use the raise hand feature for people to speak. We'd like to ask that each of you put yourself in other shoes. It is really hard to do. We all have filters from our own personal experiences that we come to meetings like this and from our lived experiences. And what we'd like each of you to do is to think beyond just what your experience is, which we do want you to bring, but also what others might be experiencing as well. It's empathy, and we'd like everyone to be empathetic and to really think beyond themselves in doing this, in participating in this work. We want to make sure as well that folks do not engage in any unprofessional, divisive, or disrespectful behavior during or between meetings. We sadly, in our experience, have actually had to come back to this at times in meetings. I get the sense that we probably won't really need to with this group, but we just want to make sure that everyone is respecting everybody else, and that even in these sort of divisive political times that we're living in now, that we want to make sure that this group, even if there's not agreement, there is respect. We will ask in our Q&A, we'd love some feedback if you think that we are missing anything else here for ground rules that you all want to abide by. These are going to be your ground rules. So we want you to weigh in. If there's anything that you think should come out of this, let us know. If there's anything you think that should be added to this, let us know. And we will bring these back at the beginnings of meetings and bring them up as needed during meetings. The decision-making process that we have is outlined here. You all are this blue box on the side, the General Plan Advisory Committee, and you all play an incredibly important role in this process as advisors, as colleagues in this. We want you to provide input and advise us in the process. But you are part of a whole team and group of folks who are going to be helping to decide the direction of the future of the city. So we also, as you see in the green box, we also have the community and interest groups, advocacy organizations. They all provide input as well, but the line on the bottom here, the arrow on the bottom, they're going to be providing input sort of directly to you all, both at these meetings through public comments, as well as you all will be looking at the results of all of the engagement that we're doing and be able to help us sort through that and squint and determine direction. All of that information will feed into the project team, which is really the consultant team and Christina, and this information will then flow up to city staff, who are going to summarize this direction, and then ultimately it's the city council who is going to make the decision on the general plan and on all of the policies in the general plan. And we can come back to this if you all have any questions about how we're interacting with each other. We actually did a couple different versions of this graphic to try and show it, but this is where it came out. But again, you all play a really, really critical role in providing this information to us and advising us so that we can give real clear direction to the city council.
And Matt, I'm sorry, just to add to what you were saying, it is hard to show, how many different voices are really going to go into the general plan in one slide. And some of the groups that aren't on there are the other committees and commissions, but we'll be going around and engaging all of them as well, on the general plan in general, and then also on the specific topic areas that they each address.
Thanks, Christina. Last is there's going to be public participation at these meetings. All meetings are open to the public. We're glad that there are a number of folks from the community who are here listening in, live on this meeting, as well as maybe watching as well. The meeting schedules, materials, and notes will be published on the project website. These meetings are recorded and they are also televised. And then for those members of the community who are here or are planning on coming, we really try and incorporate members of the public into these meetings as much as we can, given the time that we have. So there, of course, are going to be public comments at the end of the meeting. And there will be, up to 2 minutes of time for public comments. However, if time allows, we can accept questions and comments from the public, the non-GPAC members during the meetings. And then a lot of times we're actually going to have small group discussions where the GPAC, you all will break into small groups. And if there are members of the public who are participating in the meeting, we will break you all into small groups as well, so you can answer the same questions as the GPAC members are answering. And then if time allows, you can report back to the GPAC on what you in a small group came up with. So these aren't public workshops in that way, but we do want to make sure that there's as much participation from the members of the community as possible. And this is part of the dynamic and inclusive process that we really want to run here. Okay, now I'm gonna want to see if there's any questions about the roles, your roles and responsibilities, about the decision-making process. If there's any additions to the ground rules that you would like us to make, that would be great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see folks a little bit better here, and you all can see each other. Okay, let's see. Dave, do you want to take it over here?
Sure, I'll take it over here. Looks like we're already getting used to using the hand raise feature, which is great. And I see Mary, you have your hand raised, so please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks. Just a quick question. How often will you be interacting with the city council in terms of updating them along the way?
It is still being worked out. We're going to talk a little bit more about the schedule a little bit later in the meeting, but we are going to be going to the city council for input at key times during the process. So for example, when we're developing, after we're through the vision and guiding principles, we're going to want to get their feedback. We're going to want to get their feedback on the direction for land use alternatives and some of the key policy decisions. So we are going to be going back to them regularly to make sure that we're going in the right direction at each key step along the way. And as Christina said, we're also going to be going to the different boards and commissions. There's pretty much a board or commission for every topic we're covering in the general plan plus some. So we're going to make sure we're going to them as well to get their input.
Thank you, Mary. Heather, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mary, I think also, we're going to be trying on the staff level to really keep pushing updates out to all the boards and commissions and the city council, kind of the more informal status updates at meetings, just to kind of keep, not just when there's those big milestones or the big decision points, but just that kind of constant feedback loop and update, so that even if you're not at this meeting, you have a sense of what's going on and what's the next step and where we are in the timeline.
Thanks, Heather.
We would rather people say you've stop coming to us, you're giving us too much information, than where have you been and why are you not coming to us? So that's our overall philosophy.
Christina, do you have something to add? Then we'll go to Ileana.
Yeah, thank you. I just noted that somebody in the attendees, somebody in the audience has their hand raised. Right now, we're answering questions from the GPAC, but we have a public comment period at the end of the meeting.
Great eye, Christina. Yep, I was just about to mention that. Thank you so much. Ileana, you're next.
Thank you. I have a question. Will these updates, even though going to the city council, will be provided in Spanish?
That is a good input, and I do not know, but we'll do what we can. I think they were the thought that they would be more like a verbal update in a meeting, so it would be whatever we have done typically to do that. But great input, and we'll kind of put that away and figure out how we can address that. And
just to say, Ileana, that we are, and we talked about this in our small, our pre-meeting with you that we are going to have meetings that are run entirely in Spanish, and then we're also going to have interpretation at the public meetings, the big public workshops that we're doing as well. So we are going to, and we'll kind of keep coordinating with you and others who are pretty in tune with the community to make sure that we're providing the right services for access for everybody.
Great question. Thank you. Sierra, did I see your hand raised? I thought I saw it. And
Yes, you sure did for a hot second, but I feel like Matt kind of answered it. My question was along the similar lines, whether or not these spaces would have translation services provided, or what was the thinking behind that? Again, Matt kind of addressed that, but maybe if you could address it further.
Sorry, you were cutting out a little bit. Were you saying these GPAC meetings or public meetings?
Yes, yeah, these GPAC meetings. Is there a plan to get translation services going, or?
I think at these meetings we were not planning to, but I think it's something that we can certainly talk about, especially if there are requests for it. It becomes more of a desire to do that. We absolutely are going to have it in all of the public, the meetings that are really focused on the public, where the objective of those meetings is going to be for the public to participate. And so we absolutely are going to do it for those. And then, as I said also, and we'll talk about this later, we're gonna have meetings that are Spanish only, where it's just being led in Spanish. So we're not even gonna, it won't be English at all. It'll just be Spanish. So we're going to do a combination of that. But these meetings are really designed. They're designed for the GPAC. They're designed for the GPAC to discuss and have interaction. And we're going to be breaking into small groups, which then makes translation harder as well, interpretation harder. So, I think we'll sort of monitor what the participation is and what the need is and move from there.
Thank you.
Great question. Thanks. Bill, I see your hand raised, and then we'll go to Joshua. Or to Josh.
Great, thank you. I just had a thought. I would defer to your experience, the consultants, but I wondered if there's time for a short public comment period at the beginning of the meetings. I think if we're scheduled to go from 6:30 to 9, it just might be good to hear from people up front. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I know go ahead.
I'm wondering if can you guys hear me okay? My phone, it seems a little crackly.
We could hear you. You're good. Yep.
Okay, great. I might switch to my computer. I'm on a separate phone here. But Bill, one of the things that is always a struggle with these meetings is, and we'll find this, there's never enough time with these. And so, the purpose of the GPAC meetings is for the GPAC to interact. And we know that you all want to hear from the public. So it's a balance that we have of how much time is for public participation in these meetings and public comment compared to you all working together and working through things. We've tried, I think we can talk about it. We've tried to do that in the past. And what we found is that there are better times than at the beginning because we're going to be presenting information. And so we want folks to at least hear that information before they're commenting on the topic. The beginning may not be the best time, but we may have times throughout where it makes sense if we're doing multiple topics for the public to comment on that. But as I said, we try to make these meetings really interactive, and you'll see that as we really get into the interactive meetings. So the public will have a chance to participate and share their ideas, not in the same way, but on the same information.
Christina, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, just to reinforce what Matt was saying, these meetings will be less formal than other committee and commissions meetings, and we have more flexibility in our agendas. So we can invite folks to comment at different times given what's appropriate for individual meetings. In this case, we have a lot of information to get through, so we've saved it for the end.
Great, thanks all. Next, we'll go to Josh, and I think I saw Janice's hands raised after that. So Josh, you're up.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the comments, sort of the request for translation. I understand that all the different ways, all the different formats can be a challenge, but I really city staff will know that this is a drum that I've been beating for a little bit. I really hope that we can make investments here, even if it seems a lot. I want to highlight, just in particular, I would hope that we can reframe our thinking about translation and interpretation a little differently. That it's not so much about, do we see those people showing up such that there's a need? It's really, is the translation there in the first place so that they feel it's accessible to them? The translation really is that needs to be there before we see participation from these people rather than after. That's all for me. Thank you.
And if I could, Matt, if I could just jump in on that, understood, and we will see what resources we can pull to look at translation options for these GPAC meetings.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Heather. Janice, you're next. I think you might be muted, Janice.
I was going to comment on the public comment. It's really important that the public be able to participate. And sometimes at the end of a meeting, you feel like you've been to a meeting and then you just feel like you're never heard. So I appreciate the comments that were made that maybe people could actually write in questions and maybe incorporate those during the meeting. So, and then the other thing is, in case of people are deaf also, want to keep that in mind so they can participate. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. And Janice, actually, that is a good point. We should, and for staff, we should have the closed caption, the captioning here, and we should click that option in Zoom for the next meeting, so we have that available. So Janice, thank you for bringing that up. And again, we really want to make sure there's participation in these meetings. So we are going to do our best to make sure the public is involved and participating, and not. We don't want these meetings to essentially be sort of us them. We want it to be everyone, and so you'll see how we're going to do that throughout moving forward.
Thanks for that, Janice. I don't see any other hands raised. So just want to confirm, any other thoughts on the ground rules? I know we talked a lot about just questions about roles and functionality. We could definitely come back to that in the future as well, but I didn't hear any other feedback there. And you'll have a chance to review it and give us feedback at a later date. So if there isn't any other questions or comments, I think we can go on to the next section of the agenda, which is to give you a quick overview of what a general plan is and how this will work. Back to you, Matt.
And I have to remember to unmute myself before I talk. Yes, even a year later, I still make that mistake. All right, so we're going to spend the rest of the time talking just at a very high level about what a general plan is, and I think many of you know, and then talk a little bit about our process moving forward, including some of the next steps that we're going to be doing here for this group. So starting out with, what is a general plan? The general plan is a long-term policy document that guides the future of the city. It establishes the vision over the next 25 to 30 years. One of the things that I really like about the general plan is that it has this balance of taking all of the great things in the community and preserving what those things are, but there's also the recognition that the city isn't perfect, right? And you all said that in your comments about in your introduction about what you love about the city and why you wanted to join the GPAC. A lot of it was, you love the open spaces, you love the downtown, you love the river, you love the parks, but yet you also recognize that there's things that need to be improved upon, and there's threats to the city, whether it's climate change or affordable housing. So the general plan really gives us this great opportunity to step back and look at the city and look in its entirety and look at how all of these pieces fit together, because too often city government tends to work a little bit more in silos on a specific topic. This allows us to step back. It really also allows us to develop for all of you to come together to create a shared vision for the future. And it's this process of coming together that's really valuable in ending up with a general plan. And we always see the general plan not as the end of a process, but really as the beginning. It's coming together to create a vision so that then that vision can be implemented by the city and its residents. The state, as you all probably know, the general plan is a required document by the state. And there are 8 elements, which is a fancy word for chapters, topical chapters for the general plan. The 8 required elements are land use, circulation, housing, noise, conservation, safety, open space, and environmental justice. A couple of quick notes here. The housing element is the only element that cities and jurisdictions are required to update on a regular basis. And it's the only element that in its entirety needs to be reviewed and approved by the state, the Department of Housing and Community Development. We're on a schedule to do that. And when we get to the schedule, you'll see that the housing element, the preparation of the housing element is driving the schedule for this process. The other element I wanted to point out is environmental justice, because this is the new kid on the block of the general plan elements. And it is a chapter that is, and topics that have come about due to health and environmental justice inequities that have occurred throughout the state and throughout the country. And so this is the opportunity to look at the potential health and economic inequities that are happening in the city and to take steps to resolve those. So we're going to talk more about those at future meetings. So why is the city updating the general plan? It hasn't actually been that long since the last general plan was updated. I'm going to actually start with the last bullet here, which is that there is a requirement to update the housing element. And the city wanted to take the opportunity to update the entire general plan along with the housing element, so that the housing element is holistically integrated into the remainder of the general plan. There is a desire to refresh the existing plan, to have this community conversation about growth. The last general plan was really written at a time when there was an economic downturn, and the times have really changed since then. And there's really critical issues that have come about that we need to think about in terms of housing affordability, sea level rise, wildfire, health equity, new forms of mobility, and then the economy and economic development. There's also been a lot of new state requirements that have come out related to the above topics in particular. And there has been, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, there is a lot of other work that's been happening in the city in the last 12 years that should be integrated into the general plan so that it really begins to create more of a holistic picture about the future. What are the outcomes that we want from the general plan, the city wants from the general plan? I think first and foremost, it's to make sure that the community is engaged in the process. We want the community to be active and engaged and help create the vision. We want there to be citywide consensus, or as much consensus as we can, on the direction. There need to be strategies to address the housing challenges and affordable housing that is challenges that are going on. The city now has a plan for carbon neutrality by 2030, so the general plan needs to be a tool and a vehicle in order to make that happen. We need to look at the social inequities that have been happening across, globally, but bring that down locally and see what's going on locally and address social equity. There is a need to integrate with other city documents, a need to actually create a plan that is that can be implemented. And I think that's one of the challenges that all general plans really have, is they tend to be something for everybody, and they don't prioritize, and they don't have enough implementation or monitoring. And so we want to make sure that we're putting that into the plan. And then as Peggy said in our kickoff meeting, our consultant team kickoff meeting for the project last week, she wants us to create the best general plan ever. So we need to decide what that means. Peggy, I'm not sure I quoted you exactly, but it was pretty close. So we really, if Peggy says that we need to do that, we're going to do that together. I'm going to move on to the general plan update process, and then we'll open it up to some more questions. What is the project that we have here? So we are doing a general plan. The general plan also includes the housing element, as I mentioned previously, which needs to be updated every 8 years. As part of the general plan and as part of this process, our team is doing a separate project for a climate action and adaptation plan. And that will feed into the general plan itself. And then all of these documents, these two documents together will have an environmental impact report. But there are a huge number of other related efforts that are either very recent or things that are ongoing that need to be integrated into the general plan. And so while we are not actually working on those projects per se, we as the consultant team, as part of the general plan, there's a ton of other activities that are going on that are going to feed into the general plan, and we're going to have to take that into consideration. We're going to address a lot of topics in the general plan, and that is actually one of the challenges, is that the general plan really touches just about every topic that you can think of. So we're going to address the core topics of land use, urban design, and community character, but also housing, mobility, public facilities and services, parks and recreation, natural environment. We're going to look at climate change, sea level rise, safety. But in addition, and these are really the required elements and the required topics, but state law allows us to incorporate any topic that we want into the general plan. So we also have on our team, and then as part of this process, a strong focus on arts and culture. And we have a consultant who, that's what they do. They focus on arts and culture and writing arts and cultural plans and elements of general plans for cities. We are going to do a deep dive into historic and cultural resources, and then we're going to focus a lot on economic development and fiscal stability. The vision of a plan can be great, but if it can't get implemented, if there's not the money to implement that vision, then the plan will fall short of expectations. And so that's why economic development and fiscal sustainability are critical components of what we're doing. The steps in the process are outlined here. The first point is we have about a year and 9 months in order to get to the end of the process, which is an adopted general plan, an adopted housing element that's certified by the state, as well as a climate action and adaptation plan. Right now, we're in project initiation, and we have essentially a 7-step process. So we're in project initiation, and we're very quickly moving into our discovery phase, which is about existing conditions. And so that will be the spring and the summer. From there, we're going to move into the visioning phase, which is going to be starting in the next couple of months, really in June, and then going into the fall. We'll develop vision and guiding principles and overall direction for the plan. We overlapping that is the alternatives phase, where this is really about the physical growth alternatives in the city. And this is where there are a lot of challenges, as we know, because it gets into this question of how much development is there, where does it go, what does it look like, how big is it? And we know that this is where there are definitely going to be lots of different ideas about how to move forward. Parallel with the alternatives is the development of the policies. And we're going to be looking first at the high level direction for each of the topics in the general plan, and then diving in deeper to the specific policies when we move into plan development, which is going to start about a year from now and go into the fall of 2022. And then finally, late fall and in December 2022 is when we're looking to do the plan review and adoption. The major deliverables that we have a lot that we're going to be doing as a consultant team. And so you're going to be seeing a series of deliverables coming out of the process, again, so that you're not just seeing a plan at the end and wondering what were the steps that it took to get there. So this graphic identifies for each of those phases what the major deliverables are. So in the project initiation, we're going to do a project fact sheet, and we're going to create an engagement plan. And that's really going to be probably the first deliverables we're going to have, and that we're going to present back to you for review and comment. With discovery, we have a series of existing conditions. We have an existing conditions report, which is a full citywide picture, but then we're going to do deep dives in white papers on a series of topics, including arts and culture and infrastructure and other topics. And then we're really beginning our community engagement with the discovery phase with issues and opportunities. And so we'll do an engagement summary report as well. We then move into visioning, and the two main deliverables for this are going to be a vision and guiding principles report, and then an engagement summary report. And again, with visioning, there's a huge amount of engagement that we're going to be doing, reaching out into the community. The next phase is alternatives. We're going to produce an alternatives briefing book, which is going to be a summary of the different approaches to development in the city. And then ultimately, we're going to move to a preferred alternative, which will be the direction that is moving forward in terms of the physical form of the city. As I said, parallel to the alternatives is the policy development, and the deliverable for this is going to be topic-specific, what we call policy frameworks, which is going to be a summary of the goals and key policy directions so that we understand that and we get feedback on that before we move into the next phase, which is the development of the plan itself. So the draft general plan, the draft EIR, and the draft CAP. And then we move into the plan review and adoption, where we have the final general plan, CAP, and EIR, and then and we're also going to have a digital general plan that we're producing with this, so that the document is more of a living document. Throughout all of this, as I keep mentioning, public engagement, community engagement is really critical. And I want to just differentiate here. We use different, we don't call it community outreach, because outreach is just telling people about a process. What we do is we do engagement, because we want to engage the community in the development of the plan itself and in the decision-making process. So the graphic that you see here on the screen identifies the project phases on the left, and then the deliverables that that I just went through on the right side of the graphic. And then in the middle are all of the engagement activities we're going to be doing throughout the process. As I mentioned, we're starting with the community engagement plan. We're going to have the logo and branding, which is already out there partially. You'll see the logo, and you'll see this on all of the products that we're doing. The website, which the city, Christina and team created, is a great website, but we're going to do social media as well, which is going to be outreach. We're going to have a series of informational materials. We're going to do stakeholder meetings and interviews to really get up to speed quickly on what's going on in the community. We have the GPAC. We'll meet about 20 times throughout the process over the next year. So we're going to be next 2 years. So we're going to be meeting about every month, and we may have interim meetings as well as needed. And then the real engagement, which is community workshops. We're going to have educational forums, pop-up workshops. So when we can, we're going to go around in the community and have interactive activities. We're going to have sub-area workshops so that we can focus on smaller areas of the community where people who are more interested in that area can really get their hands dirty and dig in to the topics. There'll be online surveys, a whole lot of online surveys, and then also a statistically valid survey at one point in the process. We'll go to the Planning Commission and the City Council, and then we're going to have other activities as needed. One thing that we have found when we've done community engagement on general plans is that we are always, there's always more that we can do, and we are never, there's always new ideas that come up. So even though this is the list of what we have right now for community engagement, it is very likely we're going to have other activities that are happening throughout the process. We're also going to monitor with engagement who is participating. So that's going to be part of the community engagement plan, but we're going to do a demographic analysis of the community and a geographic analysis. And then as we're doing our engagement activities, we're going to monitor who's participating and compare that to who's in the community. And we'll do course corrections as we need throughout the process. The climate action and adaptation plan is a separate but related effort. We have this goal of carbon neutrality by 2030, and this plan is really going to help us figure out how we are going to get there. So it's going to be both policy as well as numeric topics, and we're going to see that there's going to be, it's going to be tough to get to carbon neutrality by 2030, but this is the plan that's going to take us there. We're also going to look at what the impacts of adaptation are going to be and how we can adapt to the changes that we know are coming for our future generations. And, I heard that a lot of you have kids and that thinking about the future, the city of the city of Petaluma, as well as just the future of the earth, is really important. And we, I personally share that as someone with kids, that we need to think about this now on a global and a local aspect. So we're going to look at sea level rise, extreme heat, wildfires, other natural hazards, and then that is all going to be incorporated both into the general plan at a high level and then into a separate climate action and adaptation plan. This is the last slide before we move into Q&A. And if you can't read everything here, that is the intent. And that is that there is so much that is recent, that has happened in the city, and that are ongoing projects that we are going to need to bring into the process. So it is amazing that a community the size of Petaluma is doing all of these amazing things. But we are going to need, this is great information for us as part of the general plan. We are not going to reinvent the wheel. We are going to build on all of this information. We're going to put it together, and it's kind of like a puzzle. We're going to put it together and see what it tells us. That's going to identify a direction, and it's also going to identify which puzzle pieces are missing that we're going to have to fill in as part of the process. So we are probably missing a number of activities, a number of projects and activities that the city is working on that are relevant, but we'll be working with staff to identify that comprehensive list moving forward. I'm going to open it up now to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it over to Dave and to lead us through the Q&A. And we want to know what questions you have about the role of the general plan in the city, and any questions you have about the update process. Let me just, because I'm going to guess that this is one of the questions, which is, what are going to be the topics that you all as a GPAC are going to be covering in your meetings? And by the next meeting, we will have a tentative list and a flow of meetings and meeting topics, so you all are prepared. Our next meeting is really going to be focusing on community engagement and on identifying issues and opportunities and confirming those issues and opportunities. But from there, we will also give you the list of all of the meeting topics that we're going to have moving forward. Okay, Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for that great intro. And just as a reminder for you all, in case you haven't been on Zoom somehow this past year, there is the raised hand function that's either on the bottom of your window somewhere, you'll see a raised hand, or if you go your participant window, if it's not there, there'll also be a raised hand function there if it's not on the band at the bottom of your window. But again, at this point, I assume you are all Zoom experts. Janice, I think I saw your hand raised first, and then we'll go to Erin.
And actually, before you jump in, if we have time, if there are members of the public who have questions about the general plan or about the process, go ahead and raise your hand, and if we have time, we'll pull you in and let you ask the question.
I just wanted clarification. When we're talking about, let's just say wish lists for a general plan, so cost elements will be incorporated in a wish list?
Did you say cost?
The cost
at
of
a high level,
certain elements.
At a high level, yes, but not for every single one, because it's not a specific plan. But we will work with staff and our team to identify the general cost of things and the potential funding sources. But more importantly, what we find is that general plans will lack trade-offs, and it won't prioritize things. So everything will have the same level of priority. And while the general plan can't be internally inconsistent, we can identify which things are more important than others. And you can't have everything, right? So we're going to have to identify that in the general plan.
Okay, and then just quickly, I always hear the word stakeholders. Could you just explain who are stakeholders?
It is anyone who has any interest in the city, whether it's a property owner, whether it's a organization that's working in the city, whether it's a business that's here, an employee that's here, citizens who live here, and even potentially visitors who come to the city. They're all part of who the community is. And Janice, you now have continued our trend of being asked that question on every single project we work on. So I was trying to actually get away from the term stakeholder, and I let it slip in because it is a confusing term.
Just last thing on surveys. Will the group be able to review the surveys before they're sent out?
Some of the survey, potentially. So some of the surveys are going to mirror what we're doing in workshops. So we are going to, if we have an engagement activity where we're asking questions at a public workshop, we'll take those same questions and we'll put them online. So we really want the group to be involved at a high level. And I would say, will you review the actual questions and the content of the survey? Leaning to no on that one, but can we brainstorm on what the survey says and what we're trying to do with the survey and the questions we're asking the public? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Janice. Christina, did you have a follow-up to that?
I just wanted to mention that Janice is bringing up an important point that Matt covered to some extent, but there is going to be a great deal of content development throughout this planning process. And so not only for surveys, but for materials that go out to the public and for the general plan itself, we can't be getting track changes from 21 people. So we're going to be having to have higher level conversations than that for pretty much all materials.
Great point. Thanks. Next, we're going to go to Erin and then followed by Bill. Erin, you're up.
Thank you. So I just want to hopefully we can be shown and solidly understand the power dynamics and those who are making the final decisions, and how their reasoning and what their reasoning is for making those out of the information they're receiving and everything like that. Because in reviewing the documents prior to the meeting and whatnot, it just gives you those thoughts of what is the point of the committee if you don't have recorded decisions from us during this process, and how are we, how is this power dynamic playing out with input from the community, but not necessarily a discernible proof of that, potentially, if that any makes sense at all. Thanks.
Christina, do you want to answer or do you want me to?
Well, Matt, you go ahead and then I can chip in.
Yeah. So Erin, ultimately the decision maker in all of this is going to be the city council. And you will notice that as we move through the process and we understand this is the first meeting, that there are going to be a lot of ideas and a lot of information. And as I said, we're going to try and move toward consensus. So you'll see that we're going to be running events with the community. We're going to be talking with all of you. But ultimately what we want to do is give those who are the decision makers in terms of the city council the information. And so if this group, which I'm sure it will have some directionality, we want to provide that to the council. We don't want to do it as a vote, mostly because what we found with general plan advisory committees is that they work a lot better when it's collaborative and you actually move away from power dynamics in a group like this if there's not voting. What we see is that there's a lot of behind the scenes when there is a voting committee, there's a lot of behind the scenes politics, and we're trying to get away from that in this, so that it's a conversation and a discourse that is happening with this group. We've also found that sometimes the general plan advisory committee may actually have a different direction than the public, and the public may actually want something different than this group. And we think that it's really fair to the process if we do identify those situations, that we take all of that to the council and let the council decide this rather than let this committee decide this. So, it is going to be, you all have a really critical role. I'm not trying to downplay the role. You have an incredibly critical role, and you will do a tremendous amount, more than anyone else, more than any other group, to really guide the process and make sure that we are getting the right direction from the community. So it is really critical, but we don't want it to be voting because of the politics that result from that and the power dynamic that you're potentially concerned about with this. Christina, do you want to answer?
Yeah, and to add to that, Matt mentioned doing straw polls. So for example, we I can imagine us using a tool such as Poll Everywhere when we are discussing some kind of particular deliverable or particular direction, where we're asking everybody to give their input, through their phone or through a Zoom poll or something like that, on a particular item that we're discussing. And we can definitely share those results because those are quantitative. With a general plan, there does need to be a certain amount of trust. We are not evil planners who are going to write this general plan to try to distort the city for our own evil gains. We are in this because we care deeply about urban sustainability and placemaking and so on. And so I want to acknowledge that. And we care deeply about what the community wants. And it wouldn't be possible for us to cross-reference every policy in the general plan. Like these 17 people thought this was a great idea and these 14 people didn't, and we voted, and so it's in here. It really is a certain amount of creative process, and we do have to assimilate huge amounts of information and input from all kinds of folks. And like Matt mentioned, this is our first meeting. So we can talk about if you feel like that's not going well in future meetings. But the intention is for us to all be collaborating on this together.
Great. Thanks for the question, Erin, and great response. Next, we're going to go to Bill, then followed by John. Bill, you're up.
Bill Wolpert?
Yes. Sorry, Bill. Yeah.
Mundane question about information management. Last time we went through the update, there were reams and reams of paper distributed, and everybody had several large binders, so you could refer to the information when you needed to. Do you have a structure or recommendations how we should organize our digital files for this? I'm curious. I'm probably going to need some help.
Great question, Christina. Good nail that, Christina.
Yeah, well, we're or perhaps not. There's a small section on the GPAC and all the materials that we sent over to you guys that's on the current website. We're going to actually have a whole page for the GPAC. So essentially we'll have all the GPAC materials on there. So it'll be a virtual database, but because these are public meetings, it will also be publicly accessible. If you choose to print things out, then you may do so, of course, but we're not going to be distributing.
No, I don't intend to print anything out. That I would try not to do that, but just so we know there's going to be basic chapters, but then we're going to highlight, we're going to go through, and we're going to have sub chapters in our headings. As you hand out information, is it going to be clear where this information should fall under what category?
Yes, we'll keep it clear on the website.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Next we'll go to John and followed by Josh. John Schribs, you're up.
Okay, just some process questions here because I've used Zoom a lot myself this last year, and the usual chat button has been replaced with a Q&A button at the bottom. And I'm used to doing a lot of chat on the side and having the moderator kind of look at that and kind of go over that at certain times. And that's been removed, but we have a Q&A little button down here. And I see I can't do anything on it really as far as asking a question, just answer questions. And I'm not sure where these questions are coming from and who's controlling them or how to use this Q&A button. It's a little foreign to me. I've never seen it before. So if you could explain that process and how we use it here, please.
Sure.
I maybe can jump in, Dave. So we actually typically in our public hearings, we have not had the Q&A or the chat function. So that we avoid kind of private conversations between certain members, that kind of stuff that can't be seen by everybody. So we're going to have to kind of regroup on the Q&A button. I'm not sure why the Q&A button is on this one when it's not on most webinars. So whether that will continue and we'll incorporate it in, or whether we will actually, that will not be there in the future, is something I think we're going to have to discuss and figure that piece out.
Thank you.
Moving forward.
Thanks for the question, John.
John, were you saying that you think we should have a chat feature so that more information can be passed along when there might be, you know, because we have limited time.
Right. With 21 participants, we can't voice everything and everybody can't be talking about every single topic. But I found that the chat or if you have a Q&A, if that's a little different how it functions, but to be able to gather our questions up as a group and then be able to answer it group wise at the end of, let's say, a topic, so that we can all get the some input, some rapidly input, since this is a more informal meeting rather than a formal city council type meeting. Maybe having that chat function there, so or a question to answer that we can put in the questions and answer them in some manner for all of us to participate and see what we're all thinking as we're flowing. So we're not just sitting here as spectators for hours on end, and then finally we get our 2 minutes to say something, and we want to say a lot more. So I think there needs to be a little bit more open discussion through the text channel of some sort.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Next, we'll go to Josh, followed by Roberto.
Thank you. I appreciate the sort of the open dialogue we've got going on here, and all this focus on process. I wanted to pick up something that I heard a little earlier in the discussion around not taking votes, but doing like straw polls and things like that. I hear what you're saying around there being at least a perception of less politics and weird dynamics when you don't introduce formal votes into things. But there's a lot of history and scholarship that's gone into showing that when power structures or decision making is not made explicit, that it just becomes implicit, and you know, those things are going to happen one way or the other. And if we don't make it explicit, that just means that the power dynamics are that much more opaque to people. So while I appreciate that our aim is really to send some directionality, some direction to City Council for consideration, I would ask that we really reconsider whether or not we have formal votes. Straw polls, I think we should be recording our decisions, even if we only understand that they're advising rather than binding.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, duly noted. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, no, just say we'll discuss that as a group after this. Thank you.
Thanks. And Bill and John, I assume you don't have another question, do you? If you might want to lower your hand unless you had another follow-up. Next, we're going to go to Roberto.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on John's comment regarding having an open discussion as we go through the charts, right? So I imagine if this was like an in-person meeting, as Matt is going through his charts, right, we would probably be asking questions live. And, you know, just as an example already, you know, I feel like Janice had her hand up back like in chart 30, but we went through 6 charts. And by then, you know, I didn't know what was on the chart, that maybe where she raised her hand. And so I would prefer personally if when we were at a chart, if it was left up. And so if someone asked a question and we build off a discussion off that, we could see what the contents were being, you know, addressed during that time. I know we want to have the gallery mode so we can see each other, but I think it's important to have the chart information up as we're discussing it, just to remind ourselves what the topic at hand is. So that's it for me.
Yeah, Roberto, yes, we can do that. It's the balance in the Zoom world that we're in of seeing each other and not having that slide up. And what I would say to the group is, you know, I think generally it's when we have these discussions, it's better that we're kind of all able to look at each other as much as we can, and then we can go back to a slide. So if anyone sees a slide and you want us to go back to it and put it back up, we can easily do that. You know, I think the other question is, are we going to be able to have questions as we move through the presentation of information? And I would say, you know, maybe I think we can try that as long as we end up getting through the material. Again, this meeting is going to be way more presenting than any of the other meetings. And a lot of the other meetings are really going to be just discussions among you all with a brief presentation and then discussions. So I think it's going to be a real different feel moving forward. And that's what I said. This is sort of the boring bureaucratic meeting. Apologies for those bureaucrats in the room. But this is that's what this meeting is really focused on, is getting this nitty gritty out of the way so that we can actually start the real fun stuff.
Answer the question, Roberto. Let's go to Erin and then to Ileana.
Just to bounce off that, I know that everybody has been using Zoom for quite a while now, but I do feel like in a lot of the meetings, whether it's Maine City Council or others that I've been present with, people don't really realize that you can change your view like side by side. So if anybody isn't aware, your view doesn't have to be the same small strip of people. You can have the screen share up on one side and resize it and see most of the staff or the people that are involved in it. So if there's other people who want more insight on how to do those things, if they're not familiar with it, like please just reach out. Plenty of us who are a little bit more like explorative on these things might be able to help you out even quickly. We wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and I actually thank you, Erin. I actually have a question for the group, which is that we typically don't send out. We typically will post we'll give you materials to read in advance, and then we're working on presentations a lot of times, pretty close as these things go up to when the meeting starts. If it would be helpful for us to send out the presentation like right at the beginning of the meeting, so you all have it, or when we get it done that day or the day before, I think we can do that so that you can actually have that information and look at it. So if you have two screens and you want to put it up on one screen, that could work as well. And Erin, yeah, you all can change the scale of what the presentation is versus the people. So, we could do that. If people don't know how to do that, we can definitely give some instructions.
Great, thanks for that, Erin. Ileana, I think you had your hand up. Did you still have a question?
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you. This question
Sure.
is for Matt. Can we decide as a group whether or not we vote rather than waiting for you to decide for us after this meeting?
So you want to vote on whether you vote?
Yes.
No, I think we're not going to be able to do that because we have been given clear direction from the city and the city council about how this committee was formed and its purpose. So, we will go back and talk about it and talk about how we can incorporate the ideas and some of the concerns that you have, but we're not going to be able to do a vote today on whether to vote.
Thank you, Ileana. I see two more hand raised. Just as a reminder, we do still have the Brown Act overview to get to as well, but we definitely want to give you all space to provide some input. So Mary, will go to you next, and then Roberto, I see you have your hand raised again. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a really important topic that a number of us have brought up. And when I was on the specific plan committee, we spent probably it seemed like the first 2 full meetings just talking about how we were going to make decisions. And we ended up making the choice to be a consensus-based decision-making body. And it was like the first painful thing we did was come up with that. But I can see how important it is. And when you go back to discuss it, I think that is how the consensus-based decision-making works. Was also a full presentation. We understand we're an advisory body, but these points that have been raised are really the foundation of how we interact and how we anticipate how our words are going to carry forward. So really, I think it's great that everybody brought that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for that. Roberto.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of tie back in with what Matt was saying about the chart kind of deadline. I would prefer if we have, maybe 2 days prior to the meeting, if the charts are uploaded for us to look at, but if, 1 day is possible at a minimum, right? Just because, it's a Thursday night if I can at least see them on a Wednesday prior to the meeting, I can at least see what we're going to go over in addition to the material you're providing, but just have a sense of what the rhythm is going to be for the meeting on Thursday, right? So I would ask if we can make the effort to at least provide, 24-hour upload of the chart for the Thursday meeting at least.
So yeah, Roberto, thank you. We are going to be sending out a letter describing what is going to be happening at the meeting, and that letter is going to have links to information that we're going to be presenting. And just as an example of this meeting, the main piece of information was the rules and the ground rules and rules of the committee, which you got, which I presented on. So, the majority of the material you actually did have, even though it wasn't in the PowerPoint. We will do our best, but I will honestly tell you, these meetings coming with the schedule that we have, typically general plans take 3 to 4 years, and we're trying to do this in a year and 9 months. So the pace of these meetings for us and the amount of work that has to happen is fast and furious. And I would love to say we're going to give you lots of time in advance, but I want to be honest with you that we're all as a team really moving hard. We will give you information, but we can't promise the PowerPoint. We will try our best.
Right. No, I understand that you guys provide the links, right? I mean, like I said, I read through the material and I saw it, but I still think it's important to see how you guys are planning to, present it as it comes, right? Just either take notes or have something ready to go. Matt's going to hit chart 2. I want to ask him this question when we hit chart 2, right? But I guess if you could do a day at least, that it would be helpful.
We will do our best.
Okay.
We will do our best. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberto. So I don't see any other hands raised, and I know we want to get to the Brown Act overview and then leave space for public comment as well.
Do we have time for a public comment or two from this? I think it'd be great if we could do it.
We offered that.
We did.
So let's have a few folks.
That's right.
Do that.
We are going to use our timer so that we make sure that we get through all of our material. So Eric, do you want to set up the timer?
And actually, what I'd like to do, and this is for Paul, David, and Barry, who have your hands up as the attendees in the meeting. We'd just love it if we don't do think of it as a 2-minute comment period. But if you have a question about how this group is run, this is the time to do it. If you have you want to talk public comment, that really should come later in the meeting. So we'll open it up now. So Paul, I think you're first in this, and Eric, do you want to unmute? Could we actually not have the 2-minute? Could we just kind of see if there's questions?
Sure, no problem. Paul.
Thanks, Eric.
Weathers, do you want to lead up the 3 comments that we have with our hands raised here?
Yeah,
let's start. Paul, David, Barry.
Okay. All right, Paul, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
All right, so you can hear me, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
All right, I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. I think excellent group you have here. Everyone really wants to have their voices heard and put forward into the general plan. I really applaud all of you. I do have a question with respect to using the tools that are available to us during this lockdown to the maximum. I think that the discussion about the chat is perfect. That's what I was asking from minute 1 when I came in. Let's enable chat the entire time. That's going to allow everybody to have input, and that can be saved. And so that's excellent input from the public, and there's no reason not to have chat on the entire time. And then the Q&A should be there for questions that need to be there. The public should not be excluded in any way from being able to participate without taking too much time. That is really my main thrust here. So my question is, I appreciate having a public comment halfway through. That was another compromise thing. So I'm glad that's going to happen. But here's the final suggestion. Hey, if you really want to have your words in the general plan, I'm going to suggest that you all write some of it. Each one write a section and hand that in and allow that to be the first draft that then gets used. Don't put other people in charge of government of the people, by the people, for the people. Don't put it in the hands of a paid consultant or a consultant who works for your city. Why don't you guys decide to write some of the sections yourselves and get your own words right in the general plan? Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. David, do you have a question? Comment? I think you can go ahead and unmute yourself, David.
Yep.
Yes, I do have a question.
David, I think you got muted. Why don't you, can you unmute yourself again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I would like to have a little bit of discussion among the people present. And by the way, excellent group. I'm so honored to be part of this community, to have people like you representing our interests for the future. My question really is, how strongly is the climate action framework going to be integrated into the general plan? I'm a little confused about it being a simultaneous shotgun rider on this journey. I would like to hear your thoughts on, will the climate action plan actually have permanent influence in the various chapters of the general plan? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer that really quickly. Yes, it will be incorporated throughout the general plan. It also is going to have a lot of information that is not going to be in the general plan. By its nature, it is going to be very detailed, and more detailed than what is going to be in the general plan or should be in the general plan. They're going to happen in parallel because the solutions for climate are topics spread throughout the plan itself. And so that's why they're integrated at this time. It's a great question. Thank you. Okay, Barry is the last one. Barry, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. You've got a tremendous challenge, very hard to manage. I'm very impressed with the council members' input tonight, and I second what Mary Dooley said about in her comments, and what Paul said. I think the chat can be open and transparent with no private conversations. It's a very useful record. It goes fast. And I'm pushing back on the idea that getting this meeting out of the way is important. The first meeting is extremely important. That's where it all gets started. And it is a power dynamic. So it's very much worth the time to establish how we want to operate. And a suggestion I have is that there be a straw poll about consensus in voting, because you've got the rumor and the disclosure, you've set the tone for a straw poll. So you could have one of those either tonight or maybe at the next meeting. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I think we are going to shift over now to Eric to talk about the Brown Act.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to everybody. And a couple questions as we get started. We talked about the time budget for this, but there's been, it's late in the evening and I don't want to take up too much time. So what are you thinking, Matt?
I actually have I'm going to, try to be interactive with this. We do have a public comment period at the end where there's 2 minutes, and I'm wondering if people who want to make a public comment at the end could raise their hand now, so we can just get a sense of time. Let's give this 1 second.
Sure.
And I think that will help us determine how much we have. We may have to go a few minutes over because I think the Brown Act conversation is important. So right now I see 3 people who are going to want to give comments. We should probably allow for a few more who may change their mind.
Sure.
So we have, which would be about 10 minutes of public comment. So, we have 20, 25 minutes is probably fair.
Okay. And how?
Some Q&A?
Yeah. Do you want to save the questions at the end or have them as we go? Whatever you prefer. It's fine by me.
I think if people, why don't we, are you going to be about 10 minutes? Sorry, folks, you're seeing, we're trying to build the plane as we're flying it here.
Yep. We do that a lot.
So why don't you do about 15 minutes of presentation. Okay. And if anyone, people raise their hand, and if it's, highlight what you think we might need to come back to, and then we can come back to those topics.
Fine. So there's quite a few slides. I'm going to zoom through them. No pun intended in terms of our meeting platform. And if I have trouble, so I'll try to share my screen now. If I have trouble, please feel free to take over. Christina. Okay. Oops. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that all right?
Yes, looks good.
Excellent, thank you. Wow, this is the first time I've done that, Heather. Okay, so hi again, I'm Eric Downey, the city attorney. This is a set of slides for a larger discussion of the Brown Act than we have time for. It also touches on some ethics and records issues, which we probably won't have much time to get into. One thing you'll see I'm going to try to do, because I think that helps in terms of providing you some overview and some facility, is I'm going to talk a little bit about the why behind the what of the Brown Act in terms of some of the purposes of the provisions rather than focusing on the detailed language, because I think that will help you anticipate potential issues and sort of understand why things are the way they are and the purpose. So without further intro, that's one of the prime authors of the Brown Act. Here is the duty provision of the Brown Act, and it's really the command about transparency of how the public's business is conducted and why it's so important under the Brown Act that the public gets the opportunity to participate in and exercise an oversight function regarding how their business is conducted. The other thing that this introduces is that it's a definitionally structured statute. So you'll see that we'll be talking about the key terms in this duty provision that is the directive as to how the public's business needs to be conducted transparently. So legislative body is a key term, local agency, open and public is key because that's really the participatory provisions of the Brown Act. Also the reference to persons being able to attend and the notice that they need for that. So that's if you take nothing else away, this is a good thing to try to keep in mind in terms of the command that we're addressing via compliance with the Brown Act. Another thing I'll mention quickly is, Christina, if you would be able to share with the committee members the Brown Act overview I provided. We have a guide that my office has published that's a little bit more wordy than this, and it's got citations to authority, but it's still pretty compressed, and I think it may be a helpful reference for you after today. So to understand about what's subject to the Brown Act, you need to look at the meeting definition and the legislative body definition. And so meetings are defined as a congregation of a majority of the legislative body. And the language of the statute says at the same time and place, but obviously that's not true now in this virtual environment. And it's also not true in some of the possible unlawful or prohibited meetings, such as serial meetings. So that's a sort of a holdover from when things were less technological. And the legislative body is the covered body, and that includes this one, obviously. And even though we refer to this body as an ad hoc committee, and primarily that's because your business is not going to be permanent once your business is concluded, the body will be dissolved. But technically speaking, this committee does not count as an ad hoc committee under the Brown Act because it's not composed solely of members of the legislative body that created it, namely the city council. And it does have a fixed meeting schedule. So for that reason, this is a legislative body subject to the Brown Act, meaning we have to satisfy the agenda and notice requirements of the Brown Act. And so we will talk about the rules that apply, some of the main ones. And that's the agenda requirements, which is the notice function. Because, and what's the purpose of that? Well, it's so that the public can take part when they choose, and what they need to know whether they wish to take part is notice about what business is going to be occurring at a meeting. And that's the agenda description and the notice of the business of the meeting that's included in the agenda. The agendas. Oh wow, this is the overview of the topics. The agendas that are for regular meetings, which are any meetings that receive 72 hours advance notice, are required to include enough of a description so that the members of the public can determine whether they want to be there and take part. And if there's time, we'll talk about the violations for not complying with the Brown Act. But I think the main topic we'll provide with respect to that is not the detailed violations, but the fact that there's a cure doctrine that allows us to address concerns about compliance by basically repeating that action. So in terms of whose subject this body is, you're a legislative body, even though you're not going to be legislating, you're going to be advising. That's a term of art in the Brown Act. Obviously the council is, and its subordinate bodies are, and standing committees and are, and those are the committees that have set schedules and are formed by formal action. We already talked about how this body is technically not an ad hoc committee for purposes of the Brown Act. Okay, so we talked about what constitutes a meeting, and when I look at the list of the appointees for this body, it looks to me like it's a total of 21, so that means the quorum is 11. So it takes a minimum of 11 of you to actually have a meeting of this body, and that will be relevant when we talk about serial meetings, which are prohibited in the Brown Act. And part of the definition of a meeting, it's a gathering to take action and deliberate on the business of the body. You'll see some of the exceptions involve gatherings that you may be able to take part in, but that don't focus on business of the body. So subject matter jurisdiction, that's your business. And it was talked about in terms of the roles and responsibilities already. So when you're deliberating and having discussion and sharing information in the scope of your role as a body, that's your subject matter jurisdiction. Again, even though you're not adjudicatory or decision-making and advisory, the same is true of most of the subordinate bodies the council's created, but that's still your subject matter jurisdiction. So what are some of the exceptions to the meeting definition, which is important for a body of this size, but also it's important because the reason the council members were elected to their positions on the council, the reason that they have chosen to appoint you and they've chosen to appoint others to subordinate bodies that they've created is because you're viewed as community leaders. And that means by definition that you're having lots of contact and communication in the community, just like leaders do. And you need to be able to continue to do that to be effective, just like the council members do. So, so it's understood you're going to do that, and even it's expected and a responsibility of your role. So the exceptions are important, and individual contacts is one. That means citizens talking to you and asking about what's going on in these meetings and sharing information that they want to be on your radar and carrying out your business. That's permitted. It's not a violation. Also, a quorum of the body or even the whole body can attend some events that I'm going to go through quickly without violating the Brown Act, as long as you don't use those as occasions to discuss the committee's business amongst yourselves. You'll see that sort of caveat. So conferences and seminars, yes. Community meetings, yes, they need to be open and publicized ones. Otherwise, it would be like a private and secret meeting, which, as you know, is not permitted for this body. Social events, the same. Again, that you can't discuss amongst yourselves your business. You can also attend, even a quorum could attend meetings of other subordinate bodies of the council, but you can only do that as observers, because if you participate, then it would be in the nature of a joint meeting and it would have to be agendized as that. So here's some examples of what are not permitted meetings. Collective briefings is one. There's actually an exception for that that's very narrow right now for emergency briefings related to emergency events such as wildfires or the current pandemic. That's pursuant to some governor's suspensions of the rules that otherwise apply under the Brown Act, but I don't think that exception is going to apply to the business of this committee. Retreats and workshops. There's a way in which almost all of your meetings will be in the nature of workshops, and there's not an exception for legislative bodies subject to the Brown Act attending retreats or workshops. Those have to be treated as meetings. Field trips, same is true. We'll sometimes agendize field trips of subordinate bodies. So serial meetings, which we'll talk about a little bit more, are by definition illegal meetings, and they're easily facilitated using technology. So what are serial meetings? They go back to the definition of a meeting that involves a quorum of the body deliberating on its business, and typically it's through technological means like emails. It can be through social media platforms. And the two main different types of serial meetings are what we call the hub and spoke and the chain ones. So you can imagine a series of emails from committee member A to B to C to D. And if those are in the nature of back and forth, like two-way communication, so that you're sharing thoughts related to the business of the committee, once you get to the quorum, then that's an illegal serial meeting of the chain type. The hub and spoke type usually occurs involving staff as intermediaries, where members may share their views on areas of their subject matter jurisdiction, and such that the staff member has facilitated the serial meeting. One rule of thumb that I like to offer is that if staff or a member of a committee knows the views of a majority of the body on subject matter business of the body that has not been presented at a agendized meeting, that's probably a result of a serial meeting. So staff briefings can be okay, and a lot of the information you're going to be receiving from staff are kind of going to be in the nature of memo type briefings, but it's what makes it permitted is it's one-way communication. What's not permitted is to share is for the views of the members to be shared, because that's by definition that's a meeting activity when that's happening. Okay. And we just covered that. So notice for an agenda description to be adequate, the rule in the law is that it's typically sufficient to have a description of less than 20 words. And the legal standard is it's supposed to be enough information so a member of the public can decide whether they'd like to show up and take part. So it's a pretty common sense. I don't know whether, and I suspect it's not going to be the case, that you'll be having a lot of special meetings, if any. You may have meetings that are different from your regularly scheduled meetings, but for Brown Act purposes, as long as 72 hours advance notice is given of the meeting, then that's a regular meeting for Brown Act purposes. Special meetings, the notice requirement is 24-hour notice. And there's some differences between what can occur at regular and special meetings that I don't think are going to be something that we'll have to focus on for the purposes of your meeting. Same with adjourned meetings. And I think it's very unlikely that you would have an emergency meeting. I don't think the city council has even had an emergency meeting since I've been city attorney for about the last 15 years. 72-hour advance notice, we talked about that. We talked about the brief description. The location rules that permit us to meet virtually as we are right now have been suspended because otherwise we'd have to have agendas posted at the multiple meeting locations from which someone's teleconferencing, et cetera. I'm going to zip through the special meeting requirements because I don't think we're going to have those. Same with adjourned meetings, same with emergency meetings. So, so that the public can participate in its business being conducted, the legislative body can't be carrying out business that it hasn't noticed, because members would be prevented from taking part that might otherwise wish to. Some exceptions, though, that are really meeting management exceptions are brief responses to questions and comments from members of the public. Oh, Peggy's telling me, reminding me that we had an emergency meeting for one of our declarations. So thanks for the reminder, Peggy. But it's nonetheless, it's very rare for the council, and I'm pretty sure none of the subordinate bodies have ever had one. So in terms of meeting management exceptions to the Brown Act, brief responses from staff to members of the public, clarification on issues that have been discussed, announcements about future events or community events, requests for future agenda items. Those are common. You will see them on council meetings and subordinate body meetings, talking about future agendas. And I anticipate that will be common for this body too. There's a mechanism for adding items to the agenda after it was posted, but it only applies at regular meetings. I don't anticipate that happening with this body, but if it does, there's a possibility for doing that. So this is talking about the scope of public participation that's permitted, and is quite broad, but the rules are intended to balance the public's participation with conducting the public's business, accomplishing both things. So criticism is permitted, free speech is permitted, but not unprotected speech. Speaker cards help in meeting management, and so do rules of decorum. So time limits, because they actually facilitate more people being able to take part, and they strike a balance with business being conducted. And this is, as you've heard, you're going to have a challenging schedule to accomplish your goals in the time that's available. So those things are going to be important items to balance in conducting this committee's meetings. Okay, closed sessions are not something I anticipate you're going to be doing. None of the city subordinate bodies have done those. So I'm going to zip through these. I mentioned the cure doctrine that I'm glad exists so that agencies can cure technical violations of the Brown Act before a claimant can bring an action to challenge or invalidate an agency action allegedly in violation of the Brown Act. They have to give an opportunity to cure, and the cure is basically to redo that action before the public, to provide them the opportunity to participate that they may have been denied. And there are that civil actions are the main ones. There is a criminal penalty for violating the Brown Act, but it's only for knowing and intentional violations. And one last thing I'll mention, because I think that's about our time, and I want to provide time for questions. And I think we probably need to return if we need to go into some of those other topics that we address when we have more time. There's been some discussion already about the understandable desirability of getting presentations and meeting materials that may go beyond just the agenda materials themselves ahead of time. And one thing I'll remind everybody with respect to those is that when a majority of the legislative body receives meetings related to an upcoming, I'm sorry, information related to an upcoming meeting, and they receive that information less than 72 hours before the meeting, then when they receive it, we have to make sure we make it available to the public at exactly the same time. Usually we do that via the clerk's office. So for staff and also the members, just to be aware, that's another logistical issues related to providing sort of last minute meeting materials. So I think with that, I will stop sharing. Hopefully that worked. And thanks for the chance to present that. And I'll be glad to respond to questions. I think we had one ahead of time that we can respond to. I don't know if there are others. And I might have done it already by talking about the quorum for this body, but happy to respond to any questions in the time that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we'll go ahead and open it back up to questions from members of GPAC. And Ali, we haven't heard from you yet, so we'll go to Ali and then to Janice.
Thanks. I was just confused, and Eric, hopefully you could just reiterate this. So you said that we can attend other city meetings as observers but can't participate. Does that mean if 11 of us want to go to the city council and comment that that's not allowed, or it has to be noticed in some different way?
That rule really relates to if you were to attend one of the other subordinate body meetings, a majority of you, you'd have to do that as observers, but you're still citizens who get to comment at meetings of the council. If you were going to be engaging with the council as a body, we would have to do that as a jointly agendized joint meeting. We've done that a few times for meetings between the planning commission and the city council. We did it when we heard presentations from consultants about vehicle miles traveled regulations. We did it when the Climate Action Commission presented their climate emergency framework. Those were joint meetings of those bodies, jointly noticed. But the rule about being just observers really applies, like if a majority of this body were to attend, say, a majority of the, the Transit Advisory Committee or something like that. Hopefully that answers that question.
Or maybe I can just ask a follow-up on that. So
Sure.
Since this is such a large committee and so many active folks involved, I could see a number of people wanting to attend the same meeting. So say 11 of us wanted to go to the Planning Commission. How would we coordinate that? How would we know in advance that we were all going to show up? What are the rules?
Well, you'd have to watch it, because you could be communicating about that and create a serial meeting in the course of doing that. So there are going to be some challenges with a body of this size, and with folks that are engaged in the community as you are. And what I would suggest you do individually is query staff about that, and we can help you navigate that. So if there's an upcoming meeting of another of the city's bodies that you feel you want to attend, you might want to alert staff in case that's something that a lot of folks are interested in. The problems really arise when more than a quorum of you are engaged. So when 11 or more, that's because otherwise that's not a meeting of this body. But I would suggest you provide information to staff about that, and we can assist to avoid problems.
Thanks for the question, Ali, and thanks, Eric. Let's go to Janice and then to John.
Eric, just quickly, in 2019, there was a court rules, public officials can't block critics on Facebook. Now, we're not public officials, so does that pertain to us at all?
Well, you are public officials, actually.
Okay.
That's why you're members of a legislative body created by the city council, the city of Petaluma, subject to the Brown Act, et cetera. So congratulations. But I'll look at that. I mean, one of the things I didn't talk about is there's there's a new rule that expressly authorizes legislative body members, and by that I mean Brown Act legislative body members, to offer and receive information, answer questions on social media platforms. That's like a brand new provision in the Brown Act, took effect this year. However, you're not supposed to answer each other's posts. So for a body this size, I think it's important you know that, because so you could, for example, put information out there. Remember, I talked about one-way communication generally not being a problem. It's when you're having two-way communication, because that amounts to deliberations potentially of a quorum of this body. So you can use those fora, and I think it's great for you too. But I think one thing you should do is avoid responding to each other's posts on those. And if you need more specific feedback on that, I'll research it, Janice.
And I went ahead and
Eric,
I just sent you that,
Okay.
the information I have.
Okay, thanks.
And Eric, does that count for likes on Facebook? So I just want to be clear, because if one person posts something and everyone on the committee hits like or dislike, then
it counts.
Because that's a really tricky one with it.
Yeah, it totally counts. That's a great question. Thank you, Matt. And it's kind of quaint. The little new rule in the Brown Act says it refers to emojis specifically. So Well,
but if you do a neutral face emoji, it's fine. But a smiley face or a sad face is not okay.
Yeah, I don't know. The case law hasn't gotten that advanced yet, Matt. We're watching that as it develops.
Well, yeah, keep an eye on that one.
No problem.
Great question. Thanks for that, Janice. Next, we'll move to John.
Okay, something about, again, just procedures about all this in the Brown Act. As a chair of the Trade Committee, I just ran into an issue where we're trying to create a document, and I want folks to help edit and do this document for like a tree technical manual or a web page we're designing. And it's a committee, like a subcommittee working on this document, but I want the whole committee to weigh in and work and edit and help edit the whole thing. And it turns out, no, we can't do that. So because we're working on a document here, and that we all want to be participating and help edit and create, or even if we want to do that, and why the system is set up the way it is now. Could you explain maybe to help folks understand the difference between subgroups editing and then having people jump in and helping edit and do things on shared, because all of us are probably using Google Docs or other shared OneDrive or something, and how shared drives and editing all impact this process that we're in right now.
Sure. Well, and it goes back to the meeting definition. Remember, it's a quorum of the body or more deliberating, and it says it at the same place and time, but it really means deliberating, in a participatory fashion. And it could be serially, which, as you know from our discussion of the serial meetings. So those are meetings. That's the problem. So to a real simplistic answer, but I hope it'll be illustrative. Documents can be meetings. So, for example, in the city council, when a majority of the council wants to sign off on a position regarding pending legislation as part of their participation in the League of California Cities, or when they want to sign off on a ballot argument for a measure going before the voters, and 5 or more of the council members want to sign, I always make sure that we actually do the signing in a public meeting, not away from, we can't send it serially for each person to sign. Now that's a very conservative view because they're just signing, but it's easy to see, I think, that, like John, in your example of actually doing, edits together on work product. I mean, that's a meeting. It's a form of deliberation, and that needs to be before the public. So that's why if there's going to be drafting done by members of a body, it needs to be done in a true subcommittee mode of less than a quorum, and then be brought back for deliberations and consideration by the full body. Because otherwise you're just having a secret meeting via Google Docs. And I don't mean to say that disparagingly, but in terms of the mechanics of the Brown Act, that's really what's happening there. And I hope that's clear, but if it's not, I'll do my best to clarify.
And I will say it's more likely that smaller groups would get together to brainstorm on topics than it is and bring it back to the group just logistically with the schedule that we have than the fact that this group would actually all get together to edit a document. So I'm not sure we're going to have to worry about that one as much. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
The other thing I was going to say, I find that it's helpful, certainly with the interaction between staff and the decision-making bodies when it comes to work product and legislation and stuff like that. For a number of reasons, including for purposes of the Brown Act, it's helpful to have that discussion at a conceptual level in terms of like, what is the idea that we're trying to accomplish with this policy? And then staff can implement that via the drafting. And it's helpful to do it that way, not only because you avoid sort of serial meetings in terms of the drafting exercise, but also it helps make sure that staff direction is very, very clear so that staff can then take that direction and provide the policy documents.
Great. Well, thank you so much for enlightening us, Eric. I'm sure there'll be more questions as we move through the process together here. With that, I think we can move on. If there is any following questions, move on to public comment. I do see we have 2 hands that are raised. So for those members of the public that would like to speak, if you can raise your hand now, and we are going to have Eric pull up the timer and go ahead and unmute folks and call you out when it's your turn.
All right, so first up is Paul G, followed by PJF. Paul, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for the time and for all your patience and attention on this long meeting. I think you've learned a lot, and I have a lot of confidence that this body is going to do a great job. So thank you for your service and your ability to participate. Now, you each have the opportunity to thread the needle and land a pivotally important general plan during uncertain times and on a quick schedule. I want to thank you again, and your work will shape future policy and outcomes of future lawsuits. It always goes back to the general plan. I think we can all recognize the unique challenges we're all facing, and that's what we have to think about as we go through this. Look, the one staring us in the face right now is the dubious pandemic and vaccine agenda. Please evaluate very carefully this government-sponsored agenda for you and your loved ones before you blindly accept government directives. The vaccines have not been tested for efficacy, meaning it is unknown if vaccine takers will be protected from contracting the disease it is allegedly intended to prevent. The research tracked evidence of antibodies only, not efficacy. There are low-cost and effective treatments available. You can seek those out in lieu of submitting to vaccines. That's important for you and your loved ones. The second challenge is the massive power grabs that are happening during periods of declared emergency. This could apply equally to the control of virus pandemic that we see. However, it can also be how you paint climate, quote, change, end quote, or climate, quote, emergency, end quote. Hey, and all about trying to make these big changes, people are grabbing for power. We have a chance to protect our unique environment in Petaluma, particularly the critically important wetlands, which as a slough and rising tides will get wetter as the years click away. That's our key resource. We have to stop all development there and encourage everything else to go in building elsewhere. We got to protect those wetlands. It's our saving grace. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Paul McGavin. Up next is PJF. I will ask that you please state your name for the record. I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to please unmute yourself.
Okay, my name is Paloma. I would like to start by thanking the members that mentioned translation services and proposed a "if you build it, they will come" attitude to accessibility. You don't put a ramp in front of a building only if you notice a bunch of people in wheelchairs congregating around the front. So translation services for ASL could be free for virtual events. And if the committee contacts deaf universities for translators, you can get people. You should have 2 translators for ASL. And this would be free and helpful and would not negatively impact English language meetings at all. Also, within the rules section, I saw several references to things being casual or avoiding strict rules in favor of a common sense approach. There must be clear rules for what happens in a conflict. Otherwise, this is a recipe for disaster. Divisive language was called out specifically, but who decides what's divisive? If I call out someone for saying something racist, that may be divisive, but I would argue that it isn't wrong and should be said. Because of this, I would urge the committee to reconsider the rules with this framing in mind. I also don't think that the suggestion to ask for a straw poll on whether or not to hold formal votes was a laughable one. Straw polls are within the allowable purview of this committee, and knowing the consensus of the committee before bringing it to the decision makers would be smart. Unless it was implied by several, or unless as it was implied by several people, straw polls are an ineffective way to understand the consensus of a group. This seems like the perfect example on why implicit rules are ineffective. Finally, as was mentioned earlier, there's no chat and there is a Q&A option, but it seems like that was a mistake for this meeting. So I think that this is missing an awesome opportunity for encouraging public engagement in politics and in the development of their own community, which seems to be directly in opposition to the stated purpose of this group. So I would just ask that you keep these things in mind as you're creating the rules for this group. I wish you all the best, and I have full confidence in the members to take this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Up next is Ben Peters. Ben, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Ben Peters here. So this is going to be a long-term planning process, and all of you are going to be actively engaged. There's a shorter-term planning process that's going to be culminating over the next month, and that is the City of Petaluma's annual Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. And so if you're not familiar with this action plan, then the city is maybe not meeting the best goal of trying to get citizen engagement in this plan. So if you go to the city website under the housing reports and documents section, that's the draft 2020-2021 CBDG action plan. And so the block grants, that's how the federal government can send money to the city of Petaluma. And as was the case with the coronavirus aid, that's how the city received some additional allocations. And that money was spent in ways which some members of the community found to be somewhat critical. Most importantly, in the annual review of block grant spending, it was determined that 100% of funds are going to white people. And so our minority communities are not engaged in this process. They're not recipients of these funds. And so those of us who are actively engaged should go look at the 2021 report, make comments, and make them before the meeting, which is about a month from now. Thank you.
Great, thank you all for spending the evening with us and for your comments. We appreciate your time as well. So I think that brings us to near the end of the meeting. Matt, did you have any follow-up comments, next steps before we wrap up?
Just got to unmute myself here. So yeah, just a couple of closing comments. I know we've gone a few minutes over, which, you know, we'll generally try not to do, but we do know that there's a lot of content to cover. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about some of the next steps and reflect a little bit on some of what we have talked about this evening. So the first is that for the next steps, we are going to be essentially on a monthly basis, a monthly pace of meetings. Our next meeting is going to talk about, we're going to brainstorm together on issues and opportunities. There's already been a survey out that the city did in the fall on issues and opportunities, and I'm sure you all have been thinking about this. But what we would like you all to do prior to the next meeting, and we'll give you some instruction, is to think at a big picture about what are the challenges facing the city in, right now and in the future, and what are those big kind of formative things that we need to think about, and what are the opportunities for positive change in the city. So if you all could think about that prior to the next meeting, that would be great, and we'll send out an email to give you some more instruction on what to think about. We will potentially do breakout groups at that meeting to give more opportunity for interaction among all of you. And then we are going to have come back to you with some engagement plan strategies for how to work with the community in different types of meetings throughout the process. We know that there's a lot of really technical information about planning, and we're going to plan do a planning 101 session that is going to be about the basics of what is a general plan, other planning documents, and all of the work that's been going on in the city regarding planning. This will be actually a separate meeting that's not part of the monthly pace of meetings, and it will happen either in the next month or the following month. We want to make sure everyone is on the same page about what is going on in terms of planning and just the basic documents. Some of you clearly have been involved in general plans, have written general plans or portions of plans, and some of you have not. So we want to get everyone's level of understanding up with that. And then we are probably going to have our first working group. As I mentioned, we're going to have, they're not subcommittees, they're working groups. So we're probably going to have our first working group to talk about engagement. There are a whole handful of you who have been and are tied in with the community and are different components of the community. And so we're going to tap some of you to be part of this engagement working group. If you are particularly interested in this, send us a note. And again, we can't go over more than a quorum, but we definitely want a small group to get together to just informally brainstorm on the ways that we can engage the community to make sure from the beginning we're tapping into your knowledge and that we're engaging the community in an effective way. The consultant team is going to be working behind the scenes on a lot of our work, the engagement plan, a project fact sheet for the general public. We're doing a comprehensive review of the existing plans to identify and summarize that so that everyone is on the same page. We'll do a demographic snapshot to look at the current trend, the current condition and the trends demographically and socioeconomically. And then we're working on our existing conditions reports, which are a few months out from here. I also, before we close, want to reflect on the comments that you all made, and we really appreciate sort of the openness to sharing ideas. Even with the way that we interact with each other, you all have given us a lot of ideas, and we're certainly going to go back and talk about how we're going to run these meetings and whether the extent to which we can do some sort of voting, because it sounds like at least some of you want to do that. Having the chat feature open, we really do want these to be really informal working meetings, and we really do want to make sure that we're tapping into your knowledge. So we will go back and we'll talk about that and make sure that we are giving all of that serious consideration. A final note that is, if there's anything that you all that comes up between the meetings and you want to reach out to staff and you want to have a conversation with one of us offline, please feel free to do so. We're happy to chat with you between the meetings if there's anything specific that you want to talk about, either about this meeting, about planning in general. And then with that, I think we have pretty much covered all of our topics. Are there any, just sort of before we go, are there any final comments from staff? I actually see one hand raised. A couple of, I see Heather. Janice, actually, Heather, why don't you go first, and then we'll go to Janice for a comment.
Sure. I just wanted to, I also have a little list of some of the questions, about translation, Q&A, the chat feature. So we'll kind of regroup on a number of those things too. So don't worry, those didn't get lost, and we'll come back and regroup and figure out what we can do and what we can bring into the next meeting. As you notice, we did realize that we have the closed caption option that we started once, I think it was Janice brought up having that, and we realized it wasn't on. So, we're getting out some of the kinks, but we'll talk about some of those things that came up and follow up with you at the next meeting.
Okay, and then Janice, you had your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's just quick. Will there be documents for like legislative updates, like on housing elements, so people can read what's coming down from the state mandates, so we can understand before making decisions?
Yeah, we will give you lots of information. I think we're going to keep adding to the website. And some of it is going to be background for all of this. And I'll tell you that, you know, we try to balance, you know, not everyone has to be an expert on every topic with this. So just for those, some of you are going to want to dive into detail on a particular topic. Some of you may want to dive into detail on every topic, and some of you may want to stay high level. So what we want to do is balance to make sure that each of you can kind of participate at the level you feel most comfortable with. So if there are, and let me just say, if there are any particular topics that you feel you need more information or want more information on, let us know. And we'll, we have a lot of resources with our team. And actually, I'll say that this group, this GPAC, has a lot of resources as well. So let us know. Maybe we'll see what else people on the team have, and then we can upload that to the website so you all and the public have access to it. I hear housing, so we'll definitely put up some housing information as well.
Yeah, and can I just, the way that the website was set up really was set up to share information too, both with this GPAC, but also the public. And so if given the breadth of topics all of you are in touch with and experts on, and you know, you come across, if there are documents too you come across that you think are a great share, you can email them to Christina. I think that it's all linked through the website, correct, Christina?
Yes, there's a section on the website called the Explore section, and in there is food for thought, and there are articles on all of the major topics in the general plan. And we
can continue to add to those.
Yeah, and there's a way, in fact, on the website to suggest articles that we should add, or you can email things to me. Chris has been sending me quite a few. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and again, if there's anything in particular you all want to hear about, just let us know. If there's anything right now you want to say for topics, let us know. We can add those in. And if not, you know, I think we're at the end of our time here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting. We're about 15 minutes over our stated time, but we also recognize, again, that sometimes these meetings are going to go a little longer because we have so many topics to cover. So I want to thank all of you tonight for participating. Thanks to members of the public for joining this evening. We have a meeting in a month. I don't remember the exact day of that meeting, but we will send out calendar invites for all of the meetings. We will do our best to send all information in advance so you have time to look at that. We're going to tap some of you for an engagement working group. Stay tuned for a Planning 101 session, and then we will regroup, as Heather said, about all of the points that you all made this evening, all of the really valid points. We understand the desire for a vote. We understand the need or the wanting to collaborate and make sure that there's clear direction from this group moving forward. So we appreciate the comments. We always start these, and we never know how people are going to respond to what we're saying and what you all want. And so we appreciate your openness and your honesty with this, and we will do our best to respond to that. So with that, thank you all for the time this evening. Oh, Christina.
Sorry, one small admin thing. Those of you who had trouble getting on, you would have gotten a Zoom link from CEO. Eric, what is the address? It's
Zoom admin at cityofpetaluma.org.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind seeing if you did, in fact, get such an email with a private link to this meeting, and let me know if that didn't come through, so that next time around you have just the link you're looking for.
And you may want to check your junk email folders, because conveniently that's where my invitations tend to show up, so I can go right there and find them. So
All right, thank you all so much. And again, thank you for taking the time to chat with us ahead of this meeting. Have a
Good night, everybody.
evening.
Thanks
Night,
all. Have a
everyone.
good night.
Thank you.